This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. It's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. So today we have a very exciting program for you, as all of our programs are. This program is especially for those of you who want to quit your job and start a business, or for those who already quit your job and are now wondering what do you do, or those of you that are pretty good entrepreneurs and want to be a great entrepreneur. So this is a program for entrepreneurs, about entrepreneurs, from one of the greatest entrepreneurs in all-time history. I mean, this is no BS here. This is probably one of the greatest entrepreneurial team in history. So for those of you who are, want to be, or need to quit your job, this is the program for you. Any comments, Kim?
Well, I've been looking forward to this program for quite a while. My first introduction to our guest, who is Guy Kawasaki, was the very first book he wrote called The Macintosh Way, because Guy is the only person that we know of, he can attest to this, that actually survived 2 times working with Steve Jobs at Apple. So he was in there in the very, very early days. So it's going to be an entertaining show. And as well, he's a huge serial entrepreneur and has been working and helping and teaching and educating entrepreneurs all over the planet. So this is going to be a fascinating show.
So, Guy, welcome to the program. And it's nice to talk to a fellow a Japanese Hawaiian guy. I didn't know you went to school in Kalihi, or you grew up in Kalihi. For those who do not know where Kalihi is, that's a pretty rough neighborhood. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, Kalihi was a little rough, but, you know, back then, I didn't know I was unhappy and impoverished.
Hey, Guy, I went to school in Hilo. That's unhappy and impoverished.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have, and then he went to Iolani School, and our former president, Obama, went to Punahou, and Punahou is for rich kids, and Iolani is for smart kids. Would you agree with that, Guy?
I like your positioning. Yes, that covers it in a nutshell. Yes.
And I went to Hilo High for kids who wanted to surf. That's all we did. So anyway,
are you a big surfer?
I grew up with it. Yeah, that's my sport. So.
And do you still surf?
No. I barely get on the water.
I took it up 2 months ago. And let me tell you, 62 is a little late to take up surfing.
I would say so.
For you.
Yeah, and now I'm obsessed with it. I surf maybe 3 or 4 times a week.
Wow.
Where?
Santa Cruz.
I
love to surf, and I have to tell you, we can pull this back to entrepreneurship, but surfing is the most challenging thing I have ever tried, and there's a lot that's in common between surfing and entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
I.e., you're sitting in the water, and you have to make a judgment about is that next wave the wave you want to catch, and in a sense, as an entrepreneur, you're sitting in the water and you're saying, well, do I want to catch the Internet of Things wave, the social media wave, the hardware wave, the fintech wave? There's a lot of similarities, and if you're a beginner like me, you miss most of the waves. But
no kidding.
That's a different story.
So are you surfing Capitola Beach in that area?
Yes, Capitola and Pleasure Point.
Wow, that's nice areas.
So if people write in to say, hey, Robert, I saw you out surfing, that was really me, not you.
Well, Guy, what's really funny is when everybody's, how the Owlies can't say Kiyosaki. So what I say is, it sounds like Kawasaki. Oh, okay, we know now.
Okay, on a related topic. I cannot tell you, Robert, how many times this has happened to me. So it works like this. People come up to me and they say, your book has changed my life. I read your book. It helped me focus my direction. It helped me get my act together. And I'm sitting there thinking, all right, so, Guy, you wrote 13 books. Which one is it? The Macintosh Way, The Art of the Start, The Art of Social Media. Which one is it? And then the next sentence they say is, yeah, I just love Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If I had $1 for every time that happened, I would be a rich man.
Well, you are a rich man.
And then I said, no, that's Robert Kiyosaki. I'm Poor Dad, Poor Dad.
I doubt that very much.
Well, I appreciate that very, very much, because you are a rock star. I mean, I was always amazed that every time we saw Steve Jobs, your face popped up alongside of him and going, what the heck's he doing, you know?
So what was it like in the early days at Apple, Guy?
Just to get you chronologically absolutely perfect, I started at Apple in 1983, and Apple started in 1976, I think.
Okay.
April Fool's Day. So I wasn't there in the absolute earliest, but I was there rather early for the Macintosh division. So to answer your question, basically every story, book, movie, magazine, article, everything you've heard about Steve Jobs is true. He was very hard to deal with. He ruled absolutely by fear. And these HR concepts of you meet with your employees and you share your mutual goals and you provide nothing but positive feedback, none of that happened. The greatest
I'm glad to hear that.
The greatest motivating fact in the Macintosh division is fear of humiliation, because
Wow.
Steve Jobs would basically pick you out in front of an employee meeting and say to you point blank, "Why are you still employed by our division?" Who hired this bozo? And I lived in such fear of that
wow.
that it made me perform at a much higher level. I'm not making this up.
I like what you say. I like what you say.
Yeah. So can I tell you my favorite Steve Jobs story?
Yeah, please.
Just to give you an insight into what it was like working for him. So one day he comes to my cubicle, and he's with this Howley guy that I've never met before, and he says, "Guy, what do you think of this company called Noware? Knoware?" I said, "Well, Steve, it's kind of a mediocre company because it has mediocre products that don't take advantage of the Macintosh user interface, the graphics, the color, sort of rudimentary drill and practice, 2 + 2 = 4, math problems." And the next thing he says is, "Guy, I want you to meet the CEO of Noware."
Oh, Jesus.
So, welcome to my life.
Well, he got honest feedback at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. He did. And actually, to my credit, in a sense, I gave the right answer, because probably Steve thought the company's products was crap too. And if I had said they were great and Steve knew they were crap, that would be the end of my career in the Macintosh division.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I'm really proud of you as a fellow Hawaiian and a Japanese Hawaiian is that, I mean, how in the world did you pop up behind one of the greatest entrepreneurs all the time? I mean, I keep seeing your face. I said, "Hey, there's a local boy there. How did he get there? How did you do that?"
Well, I wish I could tell you I planned it. Basically, as I go through my career, I've figured out that it's better to be lucky than smart. And so I've been very fortunate. From Kalihi Valley to Silicon Valley, that was quite a transition.
No kidding.
A lot of it has to do with the fact that my parents really emphasized education. So I was going to school at Kalihi Elementary. One of the Kalihi Elementary school teachers pulled my parents aside one day and said, "You've got to get him out of this public school track. You have got to get him into a harder, more challenging school." And so because she told my parents that, my parents made me apply to Iolani. I got into Iolani, and from Iolani, I don't even know why I applied to Stanford, but somehow it got in my brain to apply to Stanford, and miracles of miracles, I got into Stanford. And at Stanford, I met the guy who became the first software evangelist for Macintosh, and he hired me. So it all goes back to this one elementary school teacher at Kalihi Elementary. If she hadn't told my parents that, I would not have gone to Iolani. If I didn't go to Iolani, I wouldn't have gone to Stanford. If I didn't go to Stanford, I wouldn't have worked for Apple, and the rest is history. So, I might be in Hilo shining shoes right now.
Probably do better than me. Anyway, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. So our guest today is Guy Kawasaki. Most of you guys know him as, like I said, every time I saw Steve Jobs, I see this, what's he doing there, And they've gone on to, and what Kim says is true, we have been Apple evangelists from the start.
Yeah, we bought our first Macintosh in 1984.
And,
wow.
And then
been
I've never,
Apple ever since.
because I'm a Technosaurus Rex, I don't know how to use anything. But I just buy it. I buy Apple because of the brand. I just love what you guys did with the
I
brand.
remember when we were first shopping for a computer, Guy, you'll appreciate this. And so you had your PCs and you had Macintosh. And we kept asking, what's the difference? What's the difference? And this one salesman in this one store came up to us and we're like, what's the difference between a Macintosh and a regular PC? And he says, oh, with a Macintosh, you can express yourself. And he was so congruent and so enthusiastic, we bought on the spot. And he was absolutely right.
And can I tell you one more thing, is that I worked for Xerox, and then there was this little machine that came out, and we didn't know what it was. And that eventually became the Macintosh, because Xerox guys didn't. I was a salesman at Xerox. We had no idea what you guys were doing, and we shined it on.
There's a lesson there for entrepreneurs, because there's various versions of this story. But at one point, Steve and some of the early employees of Macintosh visited Xerox Park,
right.
And I think that was a religious moment for them, because they saw the mouse, they saw the graphical user interface,
right,
and that quote-unquote inspired the Macintosh user interface. And there's a lesson there, which is, as an entrepreneur, you cannot be proud. You cannot have a NIH mentality that it has to be something you thought of.
What's an NIH?
Part of being a good
not
entrepreneur
invented here.
is knowing what to steal.
Right. Well, there was that movie, the Pirates of Silicon Valley, which was about Gates and Jobs, and how Gates took IBM and Jobs took Xerox. How true is that?
Well, both people became very successful, so it shows there's alternate paths.
Well, you guys Gates wiped out IBM, and you guys wiped out Xerox's division.
Yeah, but then Gates wiped out Macintosh.
When we come back, I want to ask you one question, because you always trash Microsoft, and I have no problem with that, But I just want to find out what your real feelings are. I mean, don't you really love those guys? I mean, at the end, when Jobs passed, it came out that he and Gates they claimed to be friends or something. So when you come back, we'll talk about that and all this. But most importantly, I want to really find out what you think about Microsoft, and I'll tell you why when we come back.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rich Dad Radio Show. If you like what you're hearing, go to iTunes or Android, subscribe to the show, and leave a rating and review to help other financially minded people like you find the Rich Dad Radio Show. Thanks for tuning in, and keep on learning.
Every business owner and real estate investor needs asset protection. Entities like LLCs, S or C Corps are vital to protect yourself and your business. Let Corporate Direct guide you through the process of forming a corporation or LLC. Corporate Direct is owned by Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton and is Robert Kiyosaki's choice for corporate formation. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off a formation. Call 800-600-1760. That's 800-600-1760. Or visit online at corporatedirect.com. That's corporatedirect.com.
Log on to richdadradio.com while you listen. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Again, you can listen to this program anytime, anywhere on Android and iTunes. And all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. And once again, we archive them because repetition is how we learn best. Listen to this program again, you'll pick up twice what you are hearing right now. And if you discuss it with friends, family, and business people, the amount you will absorb will be astronomical. And we have a very special guest today. It's about all of what's in us. It's the entrepreneur of entrepreneurs. His name is Guy Kawasaki. He was in there with Steve Jobs, not from the start, but they took it to the heights. And we're talking about his latest book. It's called The Art of the Start 2.0. This is for all of you guys out there who want to quit your daytime job, or already have quit your daytime job and want your daytime job back, or you need to build a bigger company.
And Guy's also the chief evangelist at Canva, an online graphic design tool, and he is the brand ambassador for Mercedes-Benz. How nice is that?
So, So, Guy, I have a quick question: is that you're always trashing Microsoft, which I find entertaining, but there's I want to find out what you really think. But the reason for that is when Kim and I founded the Rich Dad Company 20 years ago, there was all-out war at the start because our partners were hardcore Microsoft fans, and Kim and I are hardcore Apple fans, and I had no way to speak because I don't even know how to use a computer. I'm just a loyal fan. Right, Kim?
Yeah, matter of fact, Rich Dad Poor Dad was written on a Macintosh.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
Yep. One of those small little gray portables that today looks like a boat anchor. But anyway, I want to ask. So, tell me why don't you like Microsoft?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's say that I have criticized Microsoft publicly in humorous ways many times.
Well, I don't know if it's humorous, but you criticized them.
But having said that, I rate my books in Microsoft Word. I use PowerPoint for my presentation. So Microsoft Office, though some people don't like it, I actually think it's very powerful and very useful. It's kind of a religious thing, but post my leaving Apple, I have worked with Microsoft, spoken for Microsoft, done a lot of work for Microsoft, and I do almost none with Apple.
Wow.
So I think I've spoken for Apple once since 1997.
Well, that's really
and
stupid on their
for
part.
Microsoft, I can't tell you how many times.
Wow.
So, and I also criticize Apple a lot too. So I just rip everybody.
I'm glad to hear that.
So you have your book was out 2015 called The Art of the Start 2.0.
Yes.
And you really do promote entrepreneurism and the startup. We have a lot of listeners who are small business owners, wannabe business owners, thinking about, they got the great idea, they want to quit their job. Where do you start?
Let me tell you what's not the start first.
Perfect.
So I think that many people believe that the start of a company is about using PowerPoint to make a pitch, using Word to make a business plan, using Excel to make a financial forecast. And I think that leads you down a path where you think that the goal of the company is to get funding. And that is not true. The goal of a company is to create customers. And in order to create customers, you need to do a bunch of things, one of which is raise money, but other things include build a prototype, get customers, hire employees. And so the first thing I want to address is, don't focus on Microsoft Office as the key apps for starting a company. The most important thing you could do is build a prototype and get to market. I'm not saying that this is only for tech businesses. I'm saying this is in general. So let's take a far-removed example from tech. Let's say that your dream is to build the ultimate restaurant or chain of restaurants. So in my mind, the prototype for a restaurant could be a food truck, right? So a food truck you could probably buy for $75,000 or $100,000. And you go out there and you test your burgers or your kalbi tacos or whatever, your mahi-mahi fish tacos, whatever you're going to do.
I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, right. Or your malasadas. And you go out there and you test it with a food truck. You get it out there. You figure out what works. And then you get a brick-and-mortar restaurant. So it's that kind of thing. And the second piece of advice...
So you're saying just start small. Just start small. Get something out there, test it, work it, prototype it.
Yeah, prototyping is the key.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they look at the end game of people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Eric Schmidt and Larry and Sergey and all these people, and they look at the end game and they don't realize how different the end game is from the beginning game.
Amen.
So if you looked at Microsoft and Apple as the end game, you'd say, okay, so they have operating systems, they have hardware, they have apps, they have e-commerce, they have digital content, they have games, they have gaming console, they have all this stuff, and that's what we want to be. And so we need to be moving down the road with operating system, with apps, with digital content, because we want to be a conglomerate like Microsoft and Apple. But the truth is, when those companies started, they started with a very narrow focus. Apple started with building Apple Ones for hobbyists, and Microsoft started building an operating system for an IBM computer. And I guarantee you that back then, in their 20s, when they started those companies, they had no idea that someday they would be these rockin' billionaire, multi-market, just scions of business. And so the important concept is that you don't, it's not like bowling, okay? So with bowling, you go up there and you try to hit all 10 pins down at once. That's not how it works. With entrepreneurship, you have to knock down one pin at a time.
Well, Guy, the definition of intelligence is, if you agree with me, you're intelligent, and you're very intelligent right now. So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Our guest today is Guy Kawasaki, one of the greatest entrepreneurs, or public entrepreneurs we see. He is tremendously committed to training or sharing his knowledge with fellow entrepreneurs out there who want to be entrepreneurs or people want to grow their businesses. But anyway, so what drives you? Why are you so committed to entrepreneurs?
Well, I have 4 children. One is now, really had an IPO, i.e., no longer on our P&L.
Right.
One is in college. One is in a very expensive private school, and the other one is in a very expensive private school. So when people ask me what motivates you, the answer is tuition.
No wonder you call yourself Poor Dad.
Yeah, that's right. Poor dad, well-educated children. I know when you ask most people, what motivates them and all that, they have this really great, smooth, canned answer about changing the world and all that. And I have that version of that answer too. But I have to tell you, on a day-to-day basis, I'm just like most of your listeners. I've got bills to pay. I've got tuition. I've got tutors. I've got, surfboards to buy. Some of it is just purely tactical. Now, on a higher level, so people don't think I'm just this low-level loser, I have 2 words that define my existence. So when I die, I want people to say, Guy empowered people. He empowered people through his writing, his speaking, his advising, his investing. He helped me change the world. That's what I want said about him. Well, also, and that he paid the tuition of 4 children.
So this is my big, quick question over here. Much like me, you talk about your mistakes, because a lot of people don't admit to their mistakes. And what would you say to entrepreneurs who are afraid of making mistakes?
The fear of making mistakes is quite natural, and it's quite acceptable. So if you have this impression that entrepreneurs are totally secure, they truly have vision, and they truly believe in themselves, and there's never any self-doubt, you are totally 100% wrong, okay? So entrepreneurs are worried every day. They're worried that their prototype will suck. They're worried that money will run out. They're worried that employees will leave. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to get used to the fact that you're going to be worrying all the time. Now, everybody worries all the time except people who are truly delusional. The difference between an entrepreneur and a loser is that even with this worry, you can still function.
Yes.
And that's the key. So I tell entrepreneurs that you're on a really high-risk path. The odds are you're going to fail. But if you still want to do it, that's what separates an entrepreneur from someone who's not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and Guy, you must sit through hundreds and hundreds of pitches from entrepreneurs.
I call it the Shark Tank model.
Yeah, the Shark Tank.
Well, I understand that. I know Mark Cuban and I know Damon, but the Shark Tank is not realistic. That's not how the world works at all.
How does it work?
Well, Shark Tank is always like, you edit down a few hours and people make a decision and they negotiate it right that. That's not how it works. It's much, much more difficult process. And building this prototype, getting everything ready, it doesn't come down to a half-hour show where you get 5 or 10 tough questions and people make a decision. And I just don't want people to get the impression that it's that easy.
Yeah,
that's very well said.
And so, what's a common mistake you hear from people who come to you and say, would you invest in my company? What's a common mistake?
Well, how long can this podcast last?
As long as we want.
Well, the most common mistake, I think, is optimism that borderlines delusion.
Yes.
Well, Guy, let me tell you a story, Guy. This guy came in and pitched me a deal, and he had the contract ready for me to sign. I said, I just met you.
Because you were going to be so overwhelmed.
I just met you. He goes, well, here it is. Sign. I'm going, what?
Yeah.
Another guy came to me for $6 million. He didn't even have a prototype. He had a sketch. I'm going, what?
So
Anyway,
I like that fine line between optimism and delusion.
I bet that you often feel this too. This happens to you too, which is people meet with me and they say, Guy, I'm a big fan.
God. I
right?
hate that.
I watched all your things on YouTube. I read all your books. Man, I really internalized everything you believe in, and I think you really love our product, our service, because it so matches what you talk about, okay?
Yep.
And then one thing in my book that is of great emphasis is that I believe that you should have about 10 slides in your PowerPoint, and you should be able to give it in 20 minutes, and the smallest font you should ever have is 30 points. That's the 10, 20, 30 rule of PowerPoint.
That's for blind
but
guys.
After they tell me they read all my books, they watched all my video, they're big fans, they're believers, they're evangelists for Guy Kawasaki, they boot PowerPoint, and the first thing I see is it's freaking 60 slides, 8-point type, and it's going to take 90 minutes to go through this. And I want to say to them, you just told me you read everything I wrote. You watched every YouTube I've ever done. And you boot PowerPoint, and there's 60 slides, 8-point font. Have you lost your mind?
And is that when you signed the contract and give them a check?
That's the wiring instructions. Yeah.
Okay, once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We have our great, fantastic guest, one of the leading entrepreneurs in the world today. Is Guy Kawasaki. His website is guykawasaki.com. Don't spell it Kiyosaki, it's Kawasaki. And
poor dad. I should get that domain.
Author of 13 books, and his most recent ones are The Art of the Start 2.0 and The Art of Social Media, came out in 2014. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Rich Dad Coaching offers a phenomenal variety of services and custom strategies, all aimed at ensuring a secure, comfortable, and rich future for you and your family. Now you can get weekly access to exclusive Rich Dad coaching services through our live stream events. Go to richdad.com and click on the On-Demand banner at the top of the homepage. Great new videos are updated regularly. Get inside knowledge and insights from Robert Kiyosaki himself, Rich Dad coaching professionals, and more. Go to richdad.com and click on the On-Demand banner at the top of the homepage.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today our program is for all you entrepreneurs who want to quit your job and become entrepreneurs, or already have quit your job and thinking about getting your job back, or people who want to grow your business, because it's really about entrepreneurship. And our special guest today is Guy Kawasaki, infamous with Steve Jobs and Apple and all this. He's the biggest brand evangelist for Apple. Kim and I are hardcore Apple fans. And today we're talking to those of you who want to start your own company. And the thing I love about talking to Guy is that, Kim and I get pitched deals all the time from wannabe entrepreneurs. And everything Guy is saying, it hurts to listen to, because the same entrepreneurs, or the wannabe entrepreneurs, make the same stupid mistakes. Right, Kim?
Yes, so we're talking with Guy Kawasaki. He was the chief evangelist of Apple twice with Steve Jobs, and he's the chief evangelist of Canva, an online graphic design tool, as well as brand ambassador for Mercedes-Benz. And his latest book he came out with is The Art of the Start 2.0 and The Art of Social Media. Guy, there's so much to cover here. The day after Steve Jobs passed, you did a talk. And
yes.
I understood you changed your talk from what it was to lessons you learned from Steve Jobs.
Yes.
And one of the lessons that hits home for Robert and myself is you say that A players hire A players. What does that mean?
That means that good managers, good executives, they hire people who are equal or better to themselves.
Amen.
So an A player hires an A player, or even better, an A-plus player. It should be a source of pride that your team is better than you at each of their functional areas. And it should be a source of embarrassment if you are the best sales, engineer, operations, finance, and marketing person.
Let me say it.
You surrounded yourself with mediocrity.
Yeah, let me say it another way, because this is being more negative than Guy. what happens is when we hire employees, some of them think they become King Tut. And the only people they hire then are people lesser than them who will drop to their knees and kiss their toes. And what Guy is saying in his statement is that when you hire a King Tut, they start hiring not A players, but B, C, and lesser players.
Yes.
And for all of you listening here, the key is really you cannot hire people with huge egos and lack of ability. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
I want people
should write a
smarter
book.
than me around me.
Well, we always say if you're the smartest person on your team, then you're in trouble.
That's true.
Because I mean, if you have to do all of that, you're never going to grow a successful company,
And
a big successful company.
Yeah,
Correct?
and the goal is to be successful, not to be the smartest person in the room.
Right,
But you
right.
you and I know there's a lot of King Tuts running around out there. Huh? And I call them their kings looking for a throne, and they make me nauseous. They're so arrogant. I'm going, hey, if you're going to treat me, the guy with the money, like this, how are you going to treat your employees?
Well, arrogance and stupidity is an ironic combination.
Well, I've been guilty of both at the same time.
But are you guilty of both of them at once?
All the time. I'm always.
Well, admitting it is the first step.
Yeah, I'm proud of it too. I'm from Hilo. You got no pride coming from Hilo, Hawaii. But anyway, the other thing was Kim and I were just talking because we were in a pitch deal on it was a juice company, and the first thing I looked at was the guy's partners, and I said, "This is never going to work, never." Right, Kim?
Yeah.
And I got chewed out at home by Kim. Said, "Why do you have to be so rude to him?" I said, "Because I smelled a rat."
Well, that was along the lines of somebody in the business for the wrong reason, and his partner was there to get a paycheck. That was it, not to be a partner. So that was pretty clear.
And the thing that she said, well, I've already done my job. Now I'm just going to be part of the company. I went, what?
But part of the problem with that startup is they did not have sales. And that was, there was no salesperson on the team.
No, but even worse
There were
worse than that guy
inventors and doctors.
is our friend is a woman, is a billionaire, and they had their hands in her pocket. That's what made me sick. I wouldn't open, but she was so sucked into the purpose, we're going to change the world and all this other stuff, everything you write about, but their hands were in her pocket, and they were there just to take money out of her pocket, as far as I was concerned. And I just blasted them in front of everybody, and Kim had to take me home on a leash.
Well, so how important in the world of entrepreneurship and business is sales?
Here, write this down.
Okay.
Sales fixes everything.
Amen.
Sales fixes everything. Now, when people hear that, a lot of them have negative reactions. They say, well, it's about creating jobs, and it's about changing the world and all that. And, I understand that at some level.
And we have the highest quality.
Yeah, right. And
sick.
we empower people and all that. So don't get me wrong. I believe in all that motherhood and apple pie. But fundamentally, when you have sales, you have revenue. When you have revenue, you're still in the game.
Yeah.
And the leading cause of failure in entrepreneurship is death. What a concept. And you die when you run out of money. So my observation is that as long as you have sales, you're still in the game. And as long as you're still in the game, you can pivot, you can change, you can do a lot of different things.
You got to make money.
Once you're out of money, you're dead.
Yeah.
Does the owner, does the entrepreneur, the founder, does that person have to be great at sales?
Not necessarily. So I think that all of entrepreneurship boils down to only two skills, which is somebody has to make it and somebody has to sell it. So that's Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Steve Jobs could sell it. Steve Wozniak could make it. If you had two people who could make it, there's nobody who can sell it.
Right.
If you have two people who can sell it, nobody to make anything to sell. So that's critical mass. All the rest is BS. Make it and sell it.
I want to recommend everybody, please get his book, The Art of the Start 2.0. This is Guy Kawasaki's book, and The Art of Social Media. Because what Guy is saying, he's telling it to you straight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's saying it better than I would say it. But anyway, what I was saying, I sit there like Shark Tank. People come and pitch me their deals, And I just can't believe it. You know, you use the word, it's the same word that Mark Cuban uses on Shark Tank. He goes, "You're delusional." So do you have a definition for delusional? Because most entrepreneurs start off delusional.
Well, but to be fair, to succeed as an entrepreneur, you need to be a little delusional.
That's what I'm saying. But how do you? This is
Where's
my
the
question.
fine line?
When do you know you've gone too far? You now drank the Kool-Aid and you're dying.
A very good test is of delusional characteristics is because I've sat in pitches like this, and I'm sure you have too, which is they come in and they say, by year 5 we're going to be doing $500 million.
Oh God.
Yep.
You know, and I point out to them, well, do you understand that would make you more successful than Google, Cisco, Apple, Ford, Mercedes, Facebook, IBM, General Motors? You understand that you are saying you're going to be the most successful company in the history of mankind. And usually their response is, yeah, and I'm being conservative.
Yes. Oh, it's that same, we're going to capture 1% of the market, right? What you talk about. The market's a
20 million
20
people.
Trillion, and we're just going to get 1%. Yeah.
Well, that is the sign. You might as well hold up a sign on your forehead that says, "I am clueless."
Another thing.
But we hear it all the time. We hear that all the time. We're just going to get 1% of the market.
Another thing I love, Guy, is when watching Shark Tank, but in real life too, somebody says, "I need $100,000." Says, "What you going to do with the money?" I can pay myself.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. Create jobs.
I want to pay you. I want to pay you. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I can't believe people come and say that.
Man, we must be meeting with the same people.
I won't say it.
Okay, so we've been talking about all the negatives, what not to do.
Yeah, what do you do?
But, okay, so here as quick as I can, I'll explain how a good meeting works, okay?
Perfect.
So the way a good meeting works is, first of all, they did the research. They understand where Guy or Robert is coming from, what we're interested in, what our background is. So they checked us out on LinkedIn. They checked us out on social media. They checked us out to get a feel that, Guy doesn't know jack about biotech, but he loves social media. So you don't come in and say, "I got the cure for cancer" to Guy, because Guy's going to say, "I don't know anything about cancer. I'm not interested." So that's number one. Number two, I think that many entrepreneurs have heard that people invest in teams. So they spend about half an hour explaining their team, So this is where I went to high school. This is where I went to college. My parents came over on the Mayflower. I took a .NET class one summer. I worked for Goldman Sachs as an intern. All this, and then they do that for each member of their team. Like, I could care less what the hell your background is until I know what your product is. So what people have to understand, and I use an airplane analogy, 2 kinds of airplanes in the world. There's a Boeing 787, 777, 747, Airbus A380. Takes 2 miles to take off. Another kind of airplane is an F-18, taking off from the aircraft carrier. That F-18 has 1.5 seconds to get to 150 kilometers, or it falls into the ocean. That's the 2 choices, right?
I've done that.
People have to understand that you have to take off like an F-18, which means that in the first 30 seconds, you need to explain what the hell you do. So
that's fantastic.
Canva, I can explain to you what Canva does. Okay, so Canva is an online graphics design service. It enables you to create beautiful graphics. I guarantee you that you can create beautiful graphics in Canva faster than you can boot Photoshop. Boom, done. You know what I do, right? That's an F-18. And so you've got to take off like an F-18. And then what you want to do as soon as you can is get to a demo. Because everybody has the slide that says 1% of this huge market. Everybody says we're hardworking, visionary, passionate people. Everybody says that. And where you separate true entrepreneurs from non-true entrepreneurs is, let me show you my prototype of Canva. Let me show you my prototype website. Try my cookie. This is what my restaurant is doing right now. We have a food truck, and we have the most popular food truck in LA. Get to the demo as soon as you can.
That's such fabulous advice, because when Kim and I created the cash flow game, Kim and I was a prototype. It was on butcher block paper, and we had bullets to represent the pieces. And the problem was nobody understood the game after we demoed it, and we were depressed. We were depressed for the longest time.
We had to dumb it down a little bit, make it a little simpler, but it was exactly what you said. You got to go out and test it, get the prototype, and then keep working at it, keep testing it.
And then the other thing that people know is that we couldn't sell the game because we couldn't get the price down, so we raised the price up. So we had a game that everybody, the focus group sort of said, yeah, I think it's worth $29.95. So we put the price at $200. It's just because it costs us $50 to make.
Wow.
So because we were so new into the business, we had no scale. So we put the price at $200, and we couldn't sell it. So then I wrote this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and the book took off.
Wow. So there's a lot of lessons in that story alone. So
well, that's
one
perseverance.
lesson I want people to really pick up is that focus groups are not that useful.
Yes. Why?
Because they don't know what they want.
That's true too. Yes. So that's one problem, and the other problem is in a focus group. There's like a lot of social interaction. So you're in a focus group, and you don't want to look stupid next to all the other people, right?
Yep.
And maybe there's this hot guy or hot gal in the focus group, so you want to
had that.
So, you come up with this really intellectual discussion of pricing and positioning and all that, and really what you just want to know is you're going to buy it or not. I mean, that's right, and that kind of stuff can't come out. And the other thing that's wrong with focus group is a focus group can tell you how to maybe evolve an existing product, but they cannot tell you how to change the world and jump to the next curve. So if you brought a lot of people who bought ice from an ice factory, hard to imagine if you said, well, what do you think if we miniaturize the ice factory and we put it in your house so you had your own personal ice factory? We're thinking of calling this a refrigerator. Would you buy it? And everybody would say, no, I just call up the ice factory or send the ice factory a telegraph, and they deliver ice in the truck. Why would I want a refrigerator in my house? So you'd say, feedback from the focus group, don't build refrigerators.
Right. And you also, Steve Jobs said, a lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. Is that is that what you're saying?
Sometimes not even after you show it to them, but yes.
So they really don't know what they want.
Yeah, so don't believe focus groups. I think the richest vein for starting a company is to build the product that you want to use. You build a product that you want to use and just hope that you're not a psychopath and you're the only person in the world who wants it.
Or delusional.
Yeah.
So, hey, Guy, once again, really, really thank you for your, I sense your dedication and commitment to entrepreneurship and making the world a better place because your products and your actions speak louder than your words. So, again, thank you very much.
Thank you. And everybody, check out Canva, Canva, and also highly recommend The Art of the Start 2.0 and The Art of Social Media. And Guy's website is very simple, GuyKawasaki.com.
Thank you.
And when we come back.
Mahalo.
When we come back, we're going to ask Robert.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Every business owner and real estate investor needs asset protection. Entities like LLCs, S or C Corps are vital to protect yourself and your business. Let Corporate Direct guide you through the process of forming a corporation or LLC. Corporate Direct is owned by Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton and is Robert Kiyosaki's choice for corporate formation. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off a formation. Call 800-600-1760. That's 800-600-1760. Or visit online at corporatedirect.com. That's corporatedirect.com.
The key to achieving your dreams is to develop a rich mindset instead of an excuse mindset. Instead of saying, I can't afford that, ask yourself, how can I afford that? It's amazing how a simple shift in thinking can open a world of new ideas and endless possibilities. Let the Rich Dad Company help kickstart your journey to financial freedom. Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Company have compiled Robert's top secrets to creating a rich mindset, now available in a 10-minute ebook, How to Achieve a Rich Mindset. This offer is available for a limited time only, so get yours today. Get your free ebook, How to Achieve a Rich Mindset. Go to richdad.com and look for the banner. Again, this is available only for a few days, so act fast. Go to richdad.com and look for the How to Achieve a Rich Mindset banner.
Financial freedom begins with financial education. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Once again, listen to this program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android, and all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them simply because you can listen to this program again, because repetition is how we learn, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur. Because today, our special guest was Guy Kawasaki. He's a chief evangelist for Apple, but now Canva, C-A-N-V-A, an online graphic design tool. He's author of 13 books. So this is a very important program because what he said, I have to agree with. I'm also kind of fascinated that his family and my family know each other, but we never met each other. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing, and we're both entrepreneurs, and we both write about entrepreneurs. Difference is, he went with Apple, and I went with Rich Dad. So, Kim, anything you want to say?
This was such a fantastic show, and I agree. You need to listen to this again and again because there was a ton of information, and we're very honored that Guy Kawasaki said he would come back on the show. Because we just really scratched the surface. He is a serial entrepreneur. He's being pitched things right, left, and center, and he's involved in so many businesses. And his information is hands-on, and he practices what he preaches, and that's why it's so real.
It's been a fantastic program with Guy, and now we're going to Ask Robert. You can submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. So what's the first question?
Our first question today comes from Anise in United Kingdom. Favorite book, Rich Dad Guide to Investing. It says, what are the main skills needed to lead a franchise, business, or a corporation?
I think the most important thing is you heard some of it today is you've really got to be willing to be constantly learning. One of the problems I have with school is that they actually believe there's a right answer. There's no such thing as a right answer. If you listen to Damon John, one of the stars of Shark Tank, entrepreneurs started FUBU, there are no answers. Every single day, you have to have $1 million idea just to survive. And too many people, I'm not trying to pick on you guys, keep sending your questions in, but I can't give you that answer. But you've got to be willing to learn constantly, right, Kim?
Yeah, and Guy said it really well, and it's what we practice and exactly what we did, how we started the Rich Dad Company is we started with a prototype. We started small. We started with a model, and we started from there. And one of the things Guy said is you need somebody who can make it, and you need somebody who can sell it. So instead of thinking about, the business and the franchise and all this, just start. Anise, do you have something? Do you have a product? Do you have a business? Do you have a prototype that you can show somebody? You just got to start and start small.
My first product I built when I was 19 years old, I went to be multi-million-dollar business, was a nylon and Velcro surfer wallet business. I went to military school and a maritime school in New York, and we didn't have any money, so we had all these, and we were sailors. We had all these old sails lying around, and every time we went on the water, our nylon, our leather wallets got wet. So one guy and I sat down there and we cut these crude little things out. It was the start of the nylon and Velcro surfer wallet business when I was 19 years old. And that's called a prototype today. So later when I was about 27 years old, 10 years later after 19, I'm in Hawaii and somebody says, what's your first product? I said, we build these little wallets. So we built these little surfer wallets, and then it took off to be an international business. But exactly as Guy Kawasaki says, you build this little prototype, and then the second step is sell it. That's it. It's not any more complicated than that. If you can't sell it, bury it in your backyard. What's the big deal? It's not that hard.
And I just got a quote here from Guy, and he talks about some of the lessons he learned from Steve Jobs. And he said, real entrepreneurs ship. And what he says, he goes, quote, I'm not saying ship a piece of crap. I'm saying ship something that has jumped the curves, that has elements of crappiness to it. Big difference. So don't wait for it to be perfect. If you have a product that can ship and has some strengths to it, ship. Don't wait till it's all perfect.
And as Henry Ford said, he says, thank God for my customers because they bought my product before it was perfect.
Yes.
And too many people are trying to build a perfect product or write the perfect book, and they don't ship. It just drives me nuts. I talk to these people and going, holy mackerel. Another thing I hear, you got to love your product. No, you don't have to love your product. I hate nylon wallets. I don't carry nylon wallets, but I could sew one. That was the thing. That's why we put different colors into them, red, white, and blue and all this stuff and Velcro. And then we had to find somebody who could manufacture. Then we had to find a way to finance the manufacturing. That meant I had to go sell the thing so we could pay for all the manufacturing and financing and all this stuff. And the learning never stopped. We went bust 2 or 3 times. So when I meet somebody, well, give me the answer. I said, there is no answer. You have to keep learning quickly. And as Guy Kawasaki said, you got to build it and ship it and then do the rest of it. But that's how you learn. Don't wait till it's perfect or you already have a multi-million-dollar company. It's really, I mean, it's so common sense. It always shocks me when we play Shark Tank. The last guy came in and showed me a picture of a sketch. There was a horrible sketch. All he was asking for was $6 million. I'm going, you got to be kidding me. I can draw a better sketch than that. You know what I mean? But people are delusional. And that's the problem with our school system. We send out delusional people. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Brian in Templeton, California. Favorite book, Rich Dad Guide to Investing. It says, why is it so hard for others to grasp the idea of building a business?
Because they went to school. The problem with going to school, there's 5 or 6 things. I'll just list them right now for you. Number 1, you have no financial education. You don't know assets from liability or what a financial statement are. Number 2 is mistakes. People in school, they punish you for making mistakes. How stupid is that? How can you learn if you don't make mistakes? Number 3 is cooperation. It's called cheating. I mean, I have to have a lot of people. I have accountants, attorneys, and all that who bring a business out. Number 4 is the problem with school. There's no such thing as real life in school. It's a bunch of academic theory and philosophy. And most school teachers, I wouldn't follow to the bathroom. So that's the problem with academics. And the last thing is it's boring. School is boring. You get into entrepreneurship, it's exciting. It's very exciting. You can't sleep at night. That's what Guy was saying. He says you can't stay awake at night because you got so many problems coming at you 24 hours a day. And if you can't handle that, keep your daytime job. Kim.
And I'd also add to Brian, you come out of school, you're so afraid of making a mistake. And so many people, they hate to be uncomfortable. They just don't want to be uncomfortable. They want to be comfortable. And one of the sayings we have...
secure.
And secure. So they're not ready to take that leap. They're afraid to take the leap. What if I fail? What if I make a mistake? What if I lose money? Well, you know what? All those things are going to happen if you get into business. And that's what you got to prepare for. So again, I'm going to recommend The Art of the Start 2.0 because Guy Kawasaki talks a lot about what it takes to start and a lot of the mistakes that he made along the way.
And he says you don't write a business plan. Have I ever written a business plan?
We've never written a business plan.
But the first time when these corporate guys come in, they write a business plan. And I sit there looking at it and said, well, what's next? I don't know. I wrote a business plan.
How can you figure out if you're starting out what's going to happen in 5 years? How would you know that?
Tomorrow.
I mean, it changes every day.
It always surprises me that people follow business plans, because especially at the start. It's possible when the business is up and running and you have some track record going. But at the start, it's just every day, man. You're just making it up as you go.
Didn't George Foreman have a saying about you have a plan, you're going along a plan until somebody punches you or something like that, until you get punched?
The plan works until somebody knocks you out in the ring.
Yeah.
Last question, Melissa.
Okay, our last question comes from Raul in Castro Valley, California. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It says, Dear Robert, what's the most important financial literacy lesson I should know in 2017?
So that's another one of those things that people are looking for the answer. And that's why you might want to listen to, since we archive all of our Rich Dad Radio programs, the answer is go to Rich Dad Radio, look up the interview with Damon John on Shark Tank, the guy who started FUBU. And he talks about how even when FUBU took off, he still had to have a job at Red Lobster just to pay the bills. And one of the biggest problems, all you school teachers listen to this, there's no such thing as a right answer. There is no such thing. There is no right answer out there. Only place there's right answers is in your silly little classroom because you actually think your right answer counts. I mean, what year did Columbus sail to America? And the answer is which year, which voyage. There's so many right answers. And most school teachers think there is one right answer. And then they pass it on to the kids, and that's why they're delusional. Keep sending your questions in to AskRobert@RichDadRadio.com. And thank you to Guy Kawasaki. Again, his book is The Art of the Startup 2.0, The Art of Social Media in 2014, and his website is GuyKawasaki.com. Please listen to people who have done the real thing. Thank you for listening.